At this point, I would tell you a joke, but I don't have the day. The day has been a joke. There, that's the joke I have for you on this fine evening. All right, we rolling. Sort of. Okay, well, the YouTube can just be its own separate joke to top off the rest of the joke that is today. Hi, I'm Andrea. I am the Education Programs Manager here at the Door County Maritime Museum. For those of you who have not seen my face before, thank you so much for coming out tonight. We have a really interesting presentation. I always love to hear more about our being the States, the dugout canoes that these lovely individuals who I will introduce to you momentarily have been working on and restoring. If you were with us last month for speaker series, Brennan is okay, and he's here tonight, and he's upright. So this is great. We are very excited about all that. Brennan's talk will be rescheduled for Thursday, May 2nd. In this room, we will feed Brennan beforehand next time. We've learned some stuff from the last month. Big thank you to our sponsors, the Door County Medical Center. Nice segue from Brennan into the Door County Medical Center. If you need medical attention, I do highly recommend Door County Medical Center. They are great. They take good care of us here. And if you need a place to stay for funsies and not for medical reasons, see, there he is. There's Brennan. Hi, Brennan, who is upright. And if you want a place to stay for funsies, unrelated to medical shenanigans, I do highly recommend Bridgeport Resort. They take awesome care of our speakers for speaker series. Okay, I have a cheat sheet because these two are so accomplished, I couldn't even try. So Sissel Schrader received her PhD from the Pennsylvania State University and is currently a professor in the Department of Anthropology. She is also an affiliate of the Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies, the American Indian Studies program, and the Material Culture, I almost said maritime, and the Material Culture Studies program. Her current research is focused on issues of socio-political complexity and historical ecology among ancient Native American societies of the Southeastern and Midwestern United States. So welcome, Sissel. Thank you so much for coming up. Ms. Schrader, this evening we have the famous Tamara Thompson, who has worked as an underwater archaeologist for the Wisconsin Historical Society since 2004. And I have a joke for you. That was a temporary job. That's funny. Good joke. When she took what was supposed to be a temporary job. Since then, she explores and maintains and preserves the Great Lakes shipwrecks, including on Tamara's day off, an accidental discovery poking up out of the bottom components there, and a whole other canoe is found. So she can't not work, even when she's not trying to work, the work comes to her. Between 2021 and 2022, found 2 ancient Ho-Chunk canoes in Lake Mendota. So please help me welcome our speakers.
Well, thank you for that, maybe. So my name is Tamara Thompson. I'm going to start us out today. And I'm going to start out actually by thanking all of the places and people who have helped us get access to these dugout canoes. Without their participation and enthusiastic cooperation of so many people across the state and institutions really across the country, this project would not have been possible. So it starts out with the dugout canoes on the bottom of Lake Mendota. How many people have heard about those? Everyone? Yeah. So in May of 2021, I was, as Andrea already tipped you off, I guess, I found a dugout canoe while recreationally scuba diving in Lake Mendota. We were swimming along, chasing fish and picking up trash, and there was the exposed end of a dugout canoe. And then in June the next year, I had found another one. So it was really cool when the 1,200-year-old canoe was discovered. It was like, wow, this thing is so old and it's in such great shape. And then this one was found, and this is 3,000 years old. So absolutely crazy that, and they were almost right next to each other. But the story really doesn't start there. It starts, I would never have been able to tell that this was a dugout canoe and wasn't just a piece of wood on the bottom if it wouldn't have been for this project that we had started a few years earlier. And it really starts with Ryan Smazel. So in 2018, Ryan was an undergraduate at the University of Wisconsin majoring in history. And his advisor called and asked if he could come and intern at the Maritime office. He was interested in doing a senior thesis, and he wasn't really sure what the topic matter would be. So we let him in, we'll let him go through our files. And after a week or so there, because he wasn't a diver at the time, we settled on a project to look at dugout canoes and museum collections across the state. So this project, again, materialized into a senior thesis, and it's more of really an anthropology project than it was a history project. So we recruited Sissel to be his advisor for the project, and so we convinced her to come in on this and help him. So the project initially started to do to use 3D modeling, and then he was recording some diagnostic information on each one of the canoes. But again, we didn't think that there were that many. We knew of 11. So we started out 11 canoes that we knew about, and these ranged in age from 150 to 1850. The 1,850-year-old canoe is actually a fragment that was discovered in Lake Mary, or Mary Lake, I guess, which is a lake in Kenosha County, it's at the Kenosha Public Museum. So he started out then looking at other historical societies. Through Wisconsin Historical Society, we have a number of regional, local historical societies, and we have coordinators. And so they did an ask, and we found a few more. People came forward. We also did a little bit of, or Ryan did a little bit of archival research, and he was able to determine that there were probably 34 dugout canoes that were in collections across the state. So a couple of things about Ryan is that he had just learned to drive. So asking him to go to Bayfield was like asking him to go to the moon. So in a lot of cases, we accompanied him on these trips and also helped him do the documentation. So when he finished his project and wrote it up and we came to the end of it, he had only looked at 26 of these canoes. And so Sissel and I started talking, and it's like, well, how hard could it be? Well, we can do a few more when we're out and around the state, and be able to get a really nice data set for him, and then help publish some papers. So then COVID hit, and we started doing a little bit more archival research because you couldn't get into these museums. So what are we going to do? We're going to look in archives. And we identified 95 dugout canoes, which have been recovered or are still in Wisconsin waters or in collections, both public and private, across the state. So we've not looked at all 95. We've gone through a little bit of we've had to do a little bit of investigation to find out where some of these ended up. So again, we're working with newspapers. So newspaper clippings and various reports from, I don't know, the Forest Service and other archaeological entities. And so some of them aren't around anymore. So we've actually looked at 73 of those. So it's a much bigger, almost double the data set that Ryan had identified. And we have dates for only 23 of them at this point. Okay, so of these 23, they're ranging in age from 80 years old, which I don't believe that 80-year-old one, but so we've resampled it and we're sending that back in, all the way up to 4,400 years old. So this is a canoe, and I can tell you a secret. So I know this is online, so it's not supposed to be told to anybody. But when we removed the 3,000-year-old canoe from Lake Mendota, it was sitting on top of another canoe. So, and that ended up being much older. So then that 4,400-year-old canoe is the oldest known dugouts in the Great Lakes region at this point. Okay, so we have all of these canoes. Again, 95 is not an accurate number because some of them have been lost or destroyed. We'll go through that in a minute. But we so we're trying to go and see all of these that originated in the state. That's kind of how we've defined. You have to have some stopping point. So we know that, you know, when some of these tribes were making these, there were not state boundaries, but for our study, we decided they had to be made in Wisconsin, or what is now Wisconsin, and that was going to define where we stopped. So we discovered that of those 95, 12 of them have been lost or destroyed. We've gone to great lengths to try to track down a lot of these canoes and figure out where they've ended up. But we know for a fact that 12 of them were lost or destroyed, so we take those out. 2 of them turned out not to be dugouts at all. Interesting, huh? One of them wasn't from Wisconsin, so we took that one out of the survey too. 2 of them were fakes. Okay, so you know, you want to get attention because, you know, dugout canoes draw a lot of attention. You build a fake, and and you get it lost on a river somewhere, and then people find it, discover it, and eventually it comes out it's a fake. So those 2 are also thrown out of here. So we're down to 5 yet that we need to go and see. So we're getting really close to seeing the end of the tunnel here with this project that just keeps on going. But unless any of you find a canoe in the rafters of your barn or in your basement, which inevitably when we give these presentations, someone will send us an email that says they know where a dugout canoe is, or so-and-so's dad has one. We may only have 5 left to go. So this leaves us with a sample of 73 that we have documented. So with this quantity of dugouts, this puts Wisconsin second in Eastern North America in the largest reported number of dugouts. So Florida exceeds us. They have more than 400 dugouts that have been reported anecdotally. But I don't know that counts because they've got more than 101 lake. So it's called Noonan's Lake. It's just outside the Gainesville area. And so of that 400, 101 lake. There was a drought period that was in the 90s, which exposed these, and they were able to document them and take some samples of them. So I can't imagine the amount of work that they went through to do that. So right now we're second only to Florida. Okay, so I'm going to pass off to, that's kind of an overview of where we're at now. I'll pass off to Sissel, and I'll be back in a couple minutes.
Thank you, Tammy. So what we're going to talk about today is based on this nearly 6-year survey of dugout canoes across Wisconsin that are in collections, in private collections, public museums, local historical societies, as well as the dugouts that are in Lake Mendota. And so what we're going to do today is give you kind of an overview of what is known about dugouts globally to help provide the context for dugouts from Wisconsin, summarize the historical knowledge of how dugouts were made, their technology and the use, and describe our survey project, particularly our strong commitment to doing collaborative work and engaging the public and engaging the tribes. And then we've also been leveraging by leveraging field research and collections-based research together to help us significantly expand our knowledge of Native American watercraft in this state, as well as contributing to knowledge of maritime history. So dugout canoes have been found all over the world, wherever there were trees that would be suitable for making a dugout canoe. The oldest securely dated dugouts in the world that are shown here, and they date to the very early Holocene, 6,000 to 9,000 years ago. So this is, sort of a more modern climate area. And so far, dugouts that date to the Pleistocene, the last ice age, have not been found. Much of what we know about how dugouts were used and produced prior to the widespread introduction of European-made iron tools comes from written accounts of the 16th century Spanish and Portuguese invasions into southeastern North America, and then the French, Dutch, and English incursions into North America, excuse me, in the 17th and 18th centuries. So I'm going to start by talking about an Englishman named Thomas Harriot, who in the mid-16th century described the method of felling trees that Native peoples used and how they made dugout canoes. And he did it in such a vivid way that the artist Theodore de Bry was able to make this illustration of Native peoples using fire around the base of standing trees to help fell the tree, and then making a dugout canoe with the help of fire to hollow it out, along with stone tools and shells, basically clam shells to help hollow it out. Now, there's an interesting tool type that is found in Eastern North America that's called the Dalton adze, and it has evidence of really heavy woodworking on it. And you can kind of see it has a lot of polish, a very distinctive polish on the edge that comes from woodworking. And these Dalton adzes date between about 11,500 years ago and 12,000 years ago. So they date to the end of the Pleistocene. So it is a potential indication. These are older than any known dugouts in Eastern North America or the world, but it indicates that at the end of the Pleistocene, Native peoples were using stone tools to do heavy woodworking. And so there's a possibility that they might have been making dugout canoes, and we just haven't found any of that antiquity. Also, their survival over that many years is maybe a bit of an issue. The absence of heavy woodworking tools in earlier assemblages predating 12,000 years ago probably indicates that the early Paleo-Indians relied more on watercraft that was made of wood, bone, skins, things like the umiaks and kayaks that were used in the Arctic, and possibly even vessels like the bull boats that were documented in the 1800s being used on the Missouri River. And these were made of bison skin that was stretched over a wooden frame. To our knowledge, the earliest documented iron tools found in association with Native American sites were introduced by De Soto in the Southeast in the 16th century. But in the Midwest, iron tools were not readily available here until the sustained presence of the French in the 17th and 18th centuries. And once iron tools were available, they were very quickly adopted to replace stone and shell tools to hollow out a log to make a dugout. Fire was still commonly used, but it wasn't as essential as it was with stone and shell tools. For many years, the Menominee actually had a booth at the Wisconsin State Fair where they would demonstrate dugout canoe making with metal tools. And I just want to kind of note and point out how much wooden debris surrounds this dugout, how much kind of waste was produced from the production of the dugout. And then more recently, in the summer of 2022, Paul Demain from Le Coudray organized a project to build 2 dugouts on Madeline Island that involved various local Ojibwe, local residents, visitors to the island, and they too relied on metal tools. In 2021 and 2022, Bill Quackenbush from the Ho-Chunk worked with their tribal youth to build a dugout canoe using metal tools, but also using fire to help hasten the process of hollowing the log out. Both the Madeline Island dugouts and the Ho-Chunk dugout were put to use on water. So they actually were taken out shortly after they were finished, just as they would have been used in the past. And so dugouts, we know, were used for a variety of activities like basic transportation on lakes and rivers by Indian peoples, as well as early fur traders like this father and his Métis son with their wares in a dugout descending the Missouri River. And this painting has kind of an interesting backstory. So if you look at the front of the dugout, what is sitting in the front of the dugout? It's a cat. It looks like a cat, and it's chained in place, which is kind of curious. Well, it's actually a bear cub that they had killed the mother to get the skin of the bear and then captured the bear cub. And George Caleb Bingham, who painted this, painted another version of the painting where it is much more obviously a bear cub. But we really like the one where it looks like they've got a cat at the front of their canoe. Dugout canoes were also documented in being used in fishing, as in this Theodore de Bry engraving, and even whaling up in Newfoundland, which seems like it would probably be the most hazardous possible use for a dugout that you could imagine. And dugouts were also used in recreation. We shouldn't forget that more ancient peoples also engaged in recreation just as we do today. And so we've got kids here playing in dugouts and taking dugouts to cross the river. So as we were kind of working with Ryan to start putting this project together, Tamara and I developed several research questions that we wanted to investigate along with some of the goals that we had for the project. One of these questions was, how does wood type vary across space and through time? Most dugouts seem to be made out of softwoods, and so we were kind of curious, is that the case across Wisconsin? Were softwoods preferred? This is the case in the Southeast, Eastern North America, most places, even the Northwest coast, most places with a strong dugout canoe tradition make use of softwoods for constructing their dugouts. We were also interested in whether or not the type of wood used would align with local paleoecological records, or would they indicate there were preferences that extended beyond what would be locally available. How do size, the form of the dugout, manufacturing marks, and other attributes vary across space and through time? Another area of our interest. And these fit along with some of the goals that we had for the project, which were, fundamentally systematically documenting the dugout canoes, determining the age of each dugout canoe, which seemed like it would be an easy thing to do when we only had 11. Produce 3D models of each dugout. Ryan was really interested in learning how to do 3D modeling, and I had been doing some of that work in my lab. And we thought that this would be a really useful way to make the dugouts more accessible to a wider range of people. Partner with Wisconsin tribes to expand the knowledge that we have of Native American watercraft and maritime history. Maritime history isn't just restricted to the Anglo-American period in Eastern North America. And we wanted to make sure that we would widely share and disseminate the results of the study and the 3D models as a digital collection to make them widely available. We also did some field research, as you can see here, including diving, wading. We had a little help from our friend Happy the Hodag up in the Rhinelander area. And I'm going to show you a short video of Tammy diving in one of these lakes up north, looking for the dugout. And you'll
us know when you see the dugout canoe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, come on, you don't see it yet?
Yes, there you go. So it is in thick weed. Well, they're not really weeds, but boy, yeah, thick vegetation in that particular lake. And then we've also been working with Bill Quackenbush from the Ho-Chunk to do ground penetrating radar across the ice on Lake Mendota to see if it can be possible to use this technique to cover a pretty large area and see if there are dugout canoes or possibly even other archaeological materials that might be on the bottom of the lake. The water clarity in Lake Mendota is pretty poor most of the year. And so this is an alternative to trying to get in enough diving in a very short amount of time. So the project, as Tammy mentioned earlier, began by looking at newspaper articles, archives, including Charles E. Brown's really careful and detailed notes on this dugout that came out of Lake Wingra in the Madison area. Oops, wrong direction. Ferdinand Hotz's photographs of Door County, including this dugout from Europe Lake that is on exhibit downstairs. Newspapers were searched for mentions of dugouts. This was one that was found in Selmer Lake in the 1960s. And we've been able to match it to a dugout in the collections of the Iola Historical Society. This is a dugout that was found in Forest County, and we documented a dugout at the Fur Trade Museum at Villa Louie, and then realized that it was this dugout from Forest County. They have no idea how that dugout came into their collections. The ideas they have happen to be wrong, but which we were able to demonstrate with this. We've also reached out to institutions, as Tammy mentioned earlier, to inquire if they had a particular dugout in their collections or any dugouts, and then made arrangements to visit and document them. And in a number of cases, when we visited an institution, we would be working on a dugout, we'd realize, oh, there's another dugout underneath that dugout, or there's a dugout up in the rafters that somebody had forgotten about. So our sample size snowballed fairly quickly. And of course, her recreational dives that she talked about earlier have led to the discovery of dugout canoes in Lake Mendota. Now, we've got pretty good coverage across the state, at least in terms of the institutions that we've visited. And we've even visited some dugouts that originated in Wisconsin that are in collections elsewhere. In New York, in Washington, D.C., in Nebraska, in Chicago, in Michigan. So we've been really like little detectives that will not give up on looking for the crime. There is no crime here, but this spatial coverage has been really helpful for us to start to identify some patterns in the qualitative and quantitative data analyses that we've done. And I'm going to turn it over to Tammy to talk with you about those different methods that we've used for documenting the dugouts.
Okay, so most people, when they come to, or they've been to a museum, they've seen a dugout canoe, they think they've seen one and they've seen them all. But it turns out that they are all very, very different. So we've recorded quite a few qualitative or descriptive information on each one of the dugouts, including the presence of metal tool marks that are present on all historic era dugouts that we've looked at. You can really see this in the Neville Museum's canoe here, that kind of scrape marks that are very evident. We've also seen canoes that have thwarts, which are these cross members that are in the bottom of the canoe. We've also seen canoes that don't have them. And when we get our, we've taken wood samples from all of these, and we get a timeline set for all 95 or 73 canoes, we'll be able to see whether the thwarts appear in any of the earlier canoes. And so far, they're really more towards the historic era of canoes. Many of the dugouts have evidence of burning, which was part of both the process of felling the tree, but also hollowing it out. You see some examples of the burn marks that you see on a couple different canoes here. Some of the historic era canoes have gauge holes. These are guide holes that are drilled through, and they've had wooden pegs put in them. And then they'll paint the edges of the peg, and then they'll start scraping until they find the color. And then that is, I think I missed the next one. So, and then that allows them to determine an exact thickness of the wood when they're constructing it. We've had a variety, sorry, I'm back to that one again. Tool marks, we talked about that already. Where did I jump to? I'm back, sorry, I jumped around. Okay, there we go. So these are the gauge holes with the plugs put in that are colorized and scraping. Okay, here we go. For many of the dugouts, it's been difficult to determine what's the bow and what's the stern because of the symmetry in their design. However, in some cases, again, this is the bottom of the Neville canoe, we see scrape marks on one end. We're attributing this to being the bow end, as that would have been the end that was dragged up on a beach. And we'll see some, again, clues that are within the objects. Some of the other dugouts have evidence of patching. So you see in the Oshkosh one, there's a pitch that's been put into a crack that's causing the bow of this canoe. And in the Menominee Logging Museum dugout, they actually have some fabric and gum that's been a sort of sticky substance of some kind that's been pounded into the crack to prevent some of the leaking. Patches are also creatively patched with, this is the bottom of a bucket, which has been used. So we see tin, brass, and copper patching of various sorts on a number of these canoes, some of them very creative. We have two historic era dugouts that have designs painted on the exterior of the canoe at the bow. In the one from the Menominee Logging Museum here, you see sort of a geometric shape that's been painted onto this. This was only visible on the canoe because this is the side that's facing a building, so it's protected. The outside face of this canoe had no evidence of this painting at all. The other canoe is Chief Ackley's canoe of Mole Lake, and this is on display at the Camp 5 Logging Museum. And this again is facing a wall. And we would not have seen this unless we pulled the canoe out when we were doing the survey to be able to see this. And we found an example of this. This thing is jumping around on me again here. Well, I'll show you in a second here. So this is more paint, green paint, and tin patches that we're seeing different colors. We're also seeing different layers, again, a geometric design on a canoe that's at the Chippewa Valley Historical Society. And we see, again, similar designs and bow art that are on birch bark canoes that we found in different places. So we're seeing sort of this artwork continuing. I think it'd be neat to do some AI with this photo to see what it believes that design was. So still jumping around, huh? Okay. So we have there's ghosts in this room, I think, you know. I know we had problems earlier. Okay, so some of the canoes have single holes that we found either in the bow of the canoe or in the floor, countersunk into the bow. We're trying to figure out what these belong to or why they're there. We've got a couple ideas. Possibly they could have stepped a mast into them to be able to hoist a sail. It was known, this is a model of the canoe that was used in the Lewis and Clark expedition, and we knew that they had a mast on their dugout canoe that had a small sail and a flag. We've also seen artwork by George Catlin here of sailing across an open bay. And if you look, they're using blankets here. It looks like this guy is holding it up, but the other one has it fastened somehow to the floor of the canoe. So maybe that's why the hole is there. It could have held a standard for a flag, like you see in the Ho-Chunk's canoe here as they were paddling across Lake Mendota 2 summers ago. It also could have been used for night fishing. So we see here in this picture, sort of artistic license, that they have a fire going in the center of their canoe. It would not have probably looked like this. They probably would have had it on some sort of pole and held out over the water in order not to, burn the floor of their craft while they're in it. It seems like sort of a comedy that would have happened here. So we also have a number of holes that go through the ends of the canoe, at the bow and sometimes at the stern. Sometimes both. The canoe will have it at bow and stern. And these could have been to either fasten a line, to be able to anchor your craft, to be able to tie them together if you were daisy chaining them together so that they could stay together in a fog. If you're towing one of the canoes that had some cargo in it, like fish or wild rice. And then we gave one of these presentations, we get a lot of feedback. We received this image from an elder from the Miami tribe who said, no, they put a stick through it and they use it for dragging up onto land. You see that they have actually a stick going through both ends, and they'll put 4 guys on it and haul it up and portage it over an area. So we then started looking a little further, and we have some historic drawings here of being able to tie a line and using it to pull the dugout canoe out. Artifacts are really rare in association with dugouts. We've only had 2 canoes that are known to have had artifacts associated with them. One is the Lake Mendota 1 canoe. It had a series of net sinkers. So we know these are stones. They're about the size of the palm of your hand. Some of them are shaped, so they would have been notched out to be able to accept the bottom of a net. But some of them are just naturally selected for their shape, so that the net would stay in place. So those are one example. The other is a canoe that was found off Strawberry Island in Lac du Flambeau, and it had tools that are associated with fur trade, fur trapping implements, traps, and some other implements for setting the traps, and axe and so on. We're getting to the point with our sample size that we're seeing similarities between some of the dugouts, but we're not really sure if this is attributed to shared practices of tribes or a particular style of a maker. But we see here an upturned end that occurs on a number of the Menominee canoes. And you see that it sort of curves, sweeps up, and then there's a flat top to the bow. But we also see this in some Ho-Chunk canoes, although in some cases it's not as abrupt of a sweep that happens. So we're not again, when we get these on a timeline, once we've done the radiocarbon dating from all of the samples, it may be easier to see where these fall. And maybe this is just, again, stylistic favor as to why they're being created this way. We've also collected qualitative data as well as categorical information on each one of the dugouts. So we've used traditional maritime baseline sketches to record length, width, depth of hold, any other kind of descriptive notes are taken to identify the canoe. Addition to this, we've taken a small wood samples, which I've alluded to a little bit throughout this. So they're probably about the size of maybe a fingernail clipping, and those are going to be sent in for radiocarbon dating. So we'll be able to take all 73 canoes and put them on a timeline of watercraft that were being used in our state. Addition to this, we're doing a strontium isotope analysis on some of the canoes. So what that means is that Sissel had told you the story about the canoe that was at the Fur Trade Museum at Villa Louis. They don't know where that canoe came from. They don't know how it got into their collection. That information has been lost. And so the strontium isotope analysis will allow us to place these canoes geographically across the state. There's enough differences in the geology across Wisconsin that we'll be able to divide it into 4 or 5 regions and say, this is likely where the canoe came from, where it was harvested from. So it'll give some of those museums maybe some history to put back with their canoes. Won't that be kind of cool? So each one of the canoes was photographed from multiple angles using really high-tech GoPro camera. And you can take these images, about 200 images are collected from each canoe, and they're put into a program called Metashape Pro. And with this, you can create a model in a matter of maybe an hour or so. It crunches this down, and they can be output as a video. From this Metashape Pro program, we can also take measurements using tools that are available in the program. Another significant technological advancement that happened over COVID was that our iPhones caught up. So these things, so when Ryan did this survey and he was trying to do the 3D models, he would run them overnight, and sometimes it would be come back the next day, and it would still be running, and the model would be crunching, and it wouldn't work. And so you would, these things allow us to get real-time information, so that before we leave a museum or someone's house that has one of these canoes, we can see whether the model's been successful. So the other advancement is with the iPhone 12, 13, and 14 Pro models. So these come with a little LiDAR sensor in them. So it's a light and laser sensor that make your cell phone into a LiDAR scanning device. So usually these things were, multiple $1,000s, and only universities and high-tech institutions could have. Now you have this in your phone. And so we started using this technology. So here's Sissel showing us how it works. This is actually at the Smithsonian outside of Washington, D.C. at one of their collection facilities. This is a Menominee canoe. And so she's scanning the canoe. It takes about 15 minutes to collect all of the imagery to be able to create the model. And she's trying to scan, just passing her iPhone over all of the surfaces of the canoe. And then once she's done this, she'll be able to show us this 3D model on her phone. And this is what that model looks like. So pretty realistic with your iPhone in 15 minutes of time. And you can spin this around, and you can output it as a video, and you can share it on Facebook with your friends. And from here, you can also take measurements. So pretty incredible stuff. So the other way of sharing the 3D models is a program called Sketchfab. So the models that are created with Metashape Pro, we output them and we put them into the Sketchfab program. Sissel will show, I think you'll show the slide later of your website as to how to access all of these. So then we'll now have a virtual museum of all the dugout canoes in the state that will go up there and you can see all the differences. So this is the one at the Manitowoc Historical Society, and with the Sketchfab, again, you can go in and instead of it just being a video that spins it around, you can manipulate it yourself using the program online. You don't have to download anything. You just go to the website and click on the thing you want to look at, and you can zoom in or zoom out and look at it from any angle you want to. These models also can be put into 3D printers. So for educational purposes, we can print out these canoes, and then they get passed around a room. They're made of plastics and resins, and you don't have to worry about the artifact. You can print them in real scale if you wanted to, but most of the time that's kind of hard to carry in your car. So these will fit into your pocket. So, and then also they can be put into virtual reality headsets. So this is Jordan, one of my office mate, has put this in, and he's showing dugout canoes to people, and then they can just like walk around and look at the canoe, and it's there projected in front of them through the Oculus headset. And this works great for outreach events as well. So, and we found a way to now mirror it onto a large screen TV. So then when people are standing in front of our booth looking ridiculous, people can actually see what they're looking at, which is kind of fun. So we're trying that out at Canoecopia if you're down in Madison for that. Okay, so back to Sissel now.
So we are still actively collecting some forms of data for this project, but we've got some preliminary results that we can share that are related to things like the size of the dugouts, the type of wood that they were made out of, and a little bit on age at this point. So the dugout width.
I tell you, ghosts.
Why did he didn't go on the screen?
It's a secret. The results are a secret.
Okay, so
It's probably angry that y'all keep talking about other museums. And it's like, you know what, that's a no.
this is still connected.
This is interpretive dance, right? The canoes are this big.
Do we want to do a field trip? The lights are on downstairs. This is a real question.
Well,
We ask questions. Well,
Yeah,
That's a great idea.
yeah. So, questions?
So in the Southwest, they have zero environments where canoes are able to be preserved for years and dendro chronology. Wisconsin, of course, is a music environment, doesn't have that opportunity. Are these canoes going to be a potential for dendro chronology for looking really far back in time and see what the climate was?
Okay, and you're working with somebody at Platteville to support that with a fragment of a dugout that just, it's a fragment that has the pit and all of the outer rings. He's been trying to build a dendrochronology sequence for southwestern Wisconsin using, I think, cedar. Oh, we're back. And so we're looking into that. It would be pretty cool if we could do that. Oh.
who wants to go to the bar? No, okay, got it.
Okay, got it. All right. So,
Don't breathe.
looking at the width of the dugouts, they kind of have a normal range of variation with an average of about 53 centimeters, most between 35 and 65. So there's a wide range. But there's a study that was done in 1996 of dugout canoes from the southeastern United States. And in that study, the scholar Mark Hartman found an average width of the dugouts in his sample of 51 centimeters. So these are very similar, which is really it's kind of interesting. And it probably, I mean, it relates in some way or another to the size, the diameter of the trees that are being used. When we look at length, we'll start to see some differences. So the intact dugouts in our sample range from about 2¼ meters in length to a little over 11 meters in length, with an average of about 4.3 meters. And most of them fall between 3 and 5 meters. So there's a pretty narrow range of the length of the dugouts. This is the shortest dugout in the sample. This is one of the Lake Mendota dugouts that's 2,000 years old. And the longest dugout in our sample is a little over 11 meters. And this is at the Sawyer County Historical Society in Hayward. Thank you. And they have a story to go with their dugout that it was used around the early to mid 1800s by a trapper named Davidson to transport supplies from Chippewa Falls northward. So we have a very short dugout in the sample from a lake and a very long dugout used on rivers. And so I dug a little more deeply into some historic records. And in the 17th century, Marquette and Joliet's, they traveled the waterways of Eastern North America. And this is the map that they drew, and it actually shows a village, a Peoria village at the confluence of the Des Moines and Mississippi rivers. And it has a notation in French about this village, about the size of the community. And in translation, this indicates that there were 300 cabins at this site and 180 wooden canoes of 50 feet in length, which is 15.25 meters. So these are long, really long, longer than the longest one in our sample. So I again turned to the records for the southeastern United States, and the longest sample in the study that was done in 1996 is 15 meters. And I've heard anecdotally of other dugouts of this length in the Southeast as well. So we may be kind of looking at the kind of a maximum length. There are some that are described as maybe much longer. None of them have been found, but there could be bigger ones as well. And I got curious and I did a little bit of math. And I thought, when we do paleodemography, we will sometimes make the assumption that a small house held 5 people, a small family. And so if you were to take the 300 cabins and multiply it by 5, you've got 1,500 people. 1,500 people using 180 canoes equals 8 people per dugout. And it just so happens there is this beautiful piece of rock art from the Canadian Shield that has people who are clearly in a dugout canoe, and there are 8 of them. It's just magical the way that all worked out. Now, most of the dugouts in our sample are a third this size, and dugouts are very rarely portrayed in rock art or in other forms of Native American art, prehistoric art. But these are line drawings from some shell engravings that were recovered at the Spiro site in Oklahoma. These date to about 1,000 years ago, like right around or 800 years ago, right in that time frame. And these are the only examples I know of for this Mississippian archaeological cultural tradition. But you see that that there are just 2 people in each dugout. The dugouts are smaller, but you also see standards that are probably set into holes in the floor of the dugouts. We've been working on a variety of hypotheses about what the dugout length might mean. And one is that it may relate to the use of the dugout, what its intended use was, whether it was wild ricing or fishing. A second is that the length may have varied through time. And hopefully as we get all of our radiocarbon dates back, we'll be able to, really put these on a timeline. And then a third hypothesis we have is that the size of the dugouts relates to the kind of water on which it was used, with shorter dugouts being used on smaller inland lakes and the larger dugouts being used on big rivers, or maybe on really big lakes, big water. Now I really geek out about this part of it. We've gotten some of the wood identified as to species. We work with somebody at the Forest Products Laboratory in Madison. And this is information that's also been recorded for dugouts across Eastern North America. It's something that people have been really interested in for quite some time. And if we look at the published literature, I've been able to track down 174 times where the wood type was recorded for a dugout in Eastern North America, and 92% are softwoods, basically pine, or maybe some cypress in the southeast. These are woods that are easier to work with stone and shell tools than hardwoods. They also are relatively lightweight. The wood is somewhat rot resistant, and pine in particular contains a resin that would facilitate the burning process as part of the hollowing out or manufacturing. So pine was likely a really desirable wood. And so it's been kind of accepted conventional wisdom that dugout canoes were made out of softwoods. Well, when we look at the sample from Wisconsin that we've had analyzed so far, roughly 2/3 of the dugouts that we have looked at are made out of softwoods, but 1/3 are made out of hardwoods. And the hardwoods are quite variable. It includes white oak, elm, butternut, hickory, and in the most recent, ash has been added as another wood. And so this makes the Wisconsin assemblage of dugout canoes stand out as really unique for Eastern North America, not in regard to wood type and the diversity of it, but also the greater representation of hardwoods. And so I got kind of interested in, well, why is this? Well, when I plot the locations of these dugouts on a map of the vegetation, the tree vegetation recorded through the public land surveys that were done in the early to mid 1800s, there's a very strong correlation in terms of the location in the state and the type of wood used. And white pine is represented with white dots on this map. And most of the pine dugouts are coming from northern Wisconsin or from eastern Wisconsin, kind of along the Lake Michigan shoreline, where pine grows well in the sandy soils. There are a couple in southern Wisconsin that may be anomalies. And this is where the strontium isotope analysis might help us place where these dugouts may have originated. And then we've got a couple hemlock and a spruce dugout. Those again are more from the northern part of the state. And then when we look at the yellow and brown and orange colors, those are all from the southern part of the state where the landscape was characterized by hardwoods. And that's a characteristic of the landscape that goes back thousands of years. So we're getting some interesting hints about traditional ecological knowledge and also the skills of the native makers of these dugouts. So if anybody in here in the audience is a woodworker, would you ever work with elm? No, it's got this weird interlocking grain, and it's just that you can't split it. It's really difficult to work with. And so it's been a surprise to us that some of the dugouts that we've looked at were made out of elm. Elm grows, it has this beautiful long straight trunk. Sometimes you get two trunks that grow out, and then it opens up above that. And it has this growth pattern, whether it grows in a closed canopy forest or an open, more open kind of forest. And interestingly enough, all of the dugouts that we've identified made of elm are dugouts that came out of Lake Mendota. They also date between 3,000 and 4,000 years ago. And this is a time period when the oxygen isotope analyses of a sediment core from Lake Mendota and pollen analyses indicate that the climate in the Madison area was warmer and drier. And under those kind of warmer, drier conditions, it is, instead of having closed canopy oak forests, the forests opened up and you get more of a savanna kind of environment. When an oak tree is growing in a closed canopy forest, it'll grow a long straight trunk. But when it's in an open savanna environment, it begins to branch very close to the ground. And so it doesn't end up with a long straight trunk that would be really well suited to making dugout canoes. And so this is just, native peoples figured out a way to work the elm into dugout canoes. Something that today, we wouldn't tackle if we we wanted to actually make something. So far, we've got radiocarbon dates on 16 of the dugouts and historically documented dates for 4 of the dugouts. And so this is just a sort of a chart showing that the oldest dugouts in our sample are about 4,000 years old. And then we've got some that might be only 80 years old, but as Tammy mentioned earlier, we think that's an anomalous date due to contamination. And we hope as we obtain more dates, we're going to be able to fill in some of the gaps on this timeline. Who knows, we might even be able to push the timeline a little further back. That would be pretty cool. So to kind of tie up here, what have we learned? Well, oh my gosh, were we surprised how many dugout canoes there were in Wisconsin? Never in our wildest dreams, especially based on what's known of all of the other Great Lakes states, did we think we would discover 94, 95 dugouts. Advances in technology in just the 5 years from when we started the project to now have made it significantly easier for us. We can more quickly produce 3D models than we could at the beginning. These will make calculating carrying capacity of the dugouts much easier than if we were just trying to do it using weird geometric calculations. And as Tammy mentioned, we can take measurements off of the 3D models, and anybody else could also take measurements off of them. So it opens up this, this assemblage to being studied by many people. Of course, the digital 3D models make the dugouts more accessible. Photogrammetry works better on some dugouts, we found, and the LiDAR sensor works better on others. So every dugout we document with both technologies. In particular, dugouts that have been painted, particularly if they're painted with like a lead-based paint, they seem to reflect the light in the sensor of the LiDAR in a way that makes it really challenging for the program to be able to create a 3D model. And so photogrammetry works better on those. And then there's sometimes when the LiDAR produces a better model than the photogrammetry. We've figured out that dugout length varies significantly, dugout width does not. And we hypothesize that the variation in dugout length might relate to the kind of water the dugouts are used on. And then the finding that's probably been, I think, one of the more significant contributions that we can make is the finding that the wood that was used to make dugouts was locally available. And a wide range of types of woods were used, not just a focus on softwoods, as archaeologists and anthropologists have generally thought. And they've got a wider range of dates than we ever thought. We were thinking these might span a couple thousand years, like the original sample of 11 did. And even fragments tell a story. So this is the Lake Mary canoe that Tammy mentioned earlier, just a fragment that, the radiocarbon date let us know this was almost 2,000 years old. and it's made out of oak. And then we've got the Lake Delavan dugout. This is the dugout, it's a prow that is being worked on to look at the dendrochronology, to, you know, sort of maybe, and then we're working on getting a radiocarbon date on it as well. So fragments are helpful and useful. And, you know, many of the dugouts that were reported that turned out to be lost or destroyed, that happened in some cases because they were just fragments. And so it was thought they weren't of value to, you know, they weren't exhibit worthy and they wouldn't have research value because, well, we all know that dugouts are made out of softwoods, but now we know that's not really the case. So what's next? We've got to visit the remaining, what are we down to? 5. I think I put 7, it's 5. There's one of those 5 we have to look for underwater. So we've got to do, Tammy's got to do a little bit more diving. Finishing the wood identifications, which is going on right now, obtaining the radiocarbon dates and doing some stable strontium isotope analysis to help source where within the state certain the trees used to make dugouts grew. We've been really fortunate to have great support. Tammy's bosses have been really supportive of her dedicating some of her time to this project. They've funded some of the radiocarbon dates for the Lake Mendota dugouts. UW-Madison Office of the Vice Chancellor for Research has given me some funding that originates with the Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation. I have a Vilas Bequest Award. So we feel really grateful for the enthusiasm of all of the organizations that provide us the support and the time to be able to do this. So if you're interested in learning more, I have a website that has a number of the models on it, and you can click and you will learn. You can go right to the Sketchfab site, look at the dugout yourself, learn what we know about it at this time. We're slowly building this out as we get more information. So it will continue to grow. And so thank you. If you do have a dugout or know somebody who has a dugout and would like to report it to us, send an email to statearchaeologist@wisconsinhistory.org. Thank you so much for your time and your attention. And now questions. Oh my gosh. So the first hand that went up in the back.
Yes, is there evidence that early